We're about to explore a story of almost unimaginable loss, a tragedy that was completely and utterly preventable, and one that shook an entire nation to its core. But this is also the story of how the echoes of that single terrible day completely reshaped safety in the workplace, creating protections that, honestly, we all take for granted now. This is the story of Aberfan.
So picture this. It's October 21st, 1966. For a 7-year-old kid named Brian Williams, the day started just like any other. It was a Friday in the small Welsh mining village of Aberfan. The morning was damp and misty, but you could feel that little buzz of excitement in the air, the kind that always comes right before a school holiday.
For all the kids in Aberfan, the walk to Pantglas Junior School was just part of the routine. Jeff Edwards, who was 8, remembers picking up his best friend along the way and stopping at the shop for sweets. You know, it was just the simple, innocent rhythm of childhood in a village where everyone knew everyone.
Inside the school, the last day before the half-term break was getting started. For Jeff, there was that little win of finishing his reading books and getting to pick a new one from the library. He chose a Tintin adventure. The kids were excited, just counting down the hours until the school day was over.
And then, right after morning registration, a sound just sliced through all the classroom chatter. It was this deep, rumbling noise that wouldn't stop. Melvin Walker, another 8-year-old, remembered his teacher going over to the window to see what was going on. It sounded just like thunder. But it wasn't thunder. It was the sound of a mountain coming down. Up on the mountain high above the village, a massive pile of coal waste, they called them spoil tips, had become totally saturated after days of heavy rain, and it just gave way. A huge avalanche of slurry, over 140,000 cubic yards of it, came racing down the mountainside at an incredible speed, aimed directly at Pantglas Junior School. The wave of black sludge just slammed into the school, completely swallowing classrooms in a single, horrifying moment. For the children who were trapped inside, there was just this deafening chaos, and then a truly terrifying silence, broken only by the screams of those who had somehow survived that first impact. When it was all over, 144 people had lost their lives. But here's the detail that absolutely shattered the heart of the nation. 116 of them were children. Most of them were between 7 and 10 years old. A whole generation of kids in one small village just wiped out in a matter of minutes. In the days that followed, that stunned grief quickly turned into a burning anger. People realized this wasn't some natural disaster. It wasn't an act of God. This was a catastrophe made by man. The country demanded answers, and that led to an official inquiry.
And this was the one question on everyone's mind. Why? Those massive piles of waste from the coal mine had been looming over the village for years. People in the village had even raised concerns about them. It was known that there were underground springs right beneath tip number 7. So, why didn't anyone do anything?
The official report from the inquiry was absolutely scathing. It put the blame 100% on the National Coal Board. It called their negligence a terrifying tale of bungling ineptitude. The report made it crystal clear. This disaster wasn't just foreseeable, it had been foreseen. The warnings were there, and they were ignored.
So the inquiry gave them answers, but of course, it couldn't heal the wounds. For the survivors, the rescuers, the families, cleaning up the physical devastation was just the beginning. The psychological scars, well, those would last a lifetime. It's honestly staggering to see how long the trauma lasted. A study was done 33 years after the disaster, and it showed the deep psychological wounds that never went away. Almost half of the survivors had suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. Think about this. The rate of lifetime PTSD among survivors was more than double that of a similar group of people who hadn't gone through that trauma. And even after 3 decades, almost a third of them were still dealing with active PTSD. That morning in 1966 never, ever left them. And this is what those numbers actually mean. For survivors like Melvin Walker, who was right there in one of the classrooms that got hit, the most normal, innocent sounds could become triggers. The sound of children playing, something that should be full of joy, would instantly take him right back to that day of terror. The horror felt across the country, combined with that damning inquiry report, created this unstoppable momentum for change. The sacrifice of all those children in Aberfan had to mean something. It became the catalyst for a complete revolution in how Britain approached workplace safety. You can literally draw a straight line from the tragedy right to this reform. The Robins Report, which was set up because of what happened, laid out a whole new philosophy. And just 8 years after the disaster, it all led to this landmark piece of legislation.
And the act was built on a totally new idea. Before this, safety law was just a confusing patchwork of really specific, rigid rules. This new law brought in one simple but incredibly powerful concept. The people who create the risk, the employers, are the ones responsible for managing it. It completely flipped the script from the government telling companies exactly what to do to making companies responsible for figuring out their own risks and dealing with them.
And this wasn't just some boring piece of legislation. It was seen as a huge, historic moment. You can see it in the headlines. They were calling it the beginning of a new era. It was a fundamental change in the relationship between employers and employees, with safety finally put at the forefront. So, the Health and Safety at Work Act is without a doubt Aberfan's most tangible and lasting legacy. It's a law that was literally born from tragedy, and it has gone on to save countless lives. The Act's impact was massive, and it was immediate. It got rid of hundreds of old, outdated laws and replaced them with one single framework. It gave 8 million workers, people in offices, schools, hospitals, legal safety protection for the very first time. And it created the Health and Safety Executive, or HSE, to make sure everyone actually followed the new rules. And the results? Well, they really speak for themselves. Since this act was passed, the number of people killed at work in Britain has dropped by over 75%. That is an incredible, life-saving legacy. This comparison really says it all, doesn't it? The Act helped transform those incredibly dangerous workplaces of the past into the highly regulated, safety-first environments we expect today. It's a world of difference, and it's a world that was made safer because of the lessons that had to be learned from this awful tragedy. But we really have to end where we started. Not with laws and statistics, but with the human cost. The safety that we have now was paid for with a price that is just impossible to fully comprehend. For the village of Aberfan, the loss was total and it was permanent. It's a wound that can never, ever truly heal. So it kind of leaves us with this final thought. The next time you see a high-vis jacket or a safety sign or go through a fire drill at work, just take a second to remember that all these things are part of a legacy that ensures the lessons from places like Aberfan are never forgotten.